Hey you guys, welcome back to Rocket City Yardstead. If you're new, I'm Sarah, welcome. So today I need to make some more oat flour. I have used up all of my oat flour, and that got me to thinking that I would really like to have some quick bread for breakfast. We're into these days now where the mornings are getting light later and it's cooler, and some nice warm quick bread sounds really nice for that. So I have this recipe that I love. It's for a zucchini bread that uses oat flour. I frequently will substitute out the zucchini and use applesauce and make an applesauce quick bread. It's so yummy. It's great on these cool mornings. And so I thought I would share that with you guys. So the first thing I've got to get going is making this oat flour, and then we can get to the quick bread. You have a high powered blender like a Vitamix or a Blendtec. I don't know. Those are the two brands I'm familiar with. But if you have either one of those and you have never made flour in it, especially if you're like me and you need things like oat flour, it makes the blender totally worth it, because it's so much more economical to make your own flour like this. So I'm going to get my lid on, turn it on. There you have it, guys. Just really not that long, less than a minute in the blender. And we've got oat flour. I've got the oat flour made, so now we can make our applesauce quick bread. So the first thing I need to do is get my wet ingredients all mixed together. I did want to mention this in case you've never heard of this or thought of it, but it calls for a room temperature egg, which I did not have. So I just got a cup of warm water and put my egg in it to help bring it up to room temperature. And that makes it go a lot faster. So you need room temperature eggs, but they're coming straight out of your fridge. Just pop them in some warm water for a little while. So this recipe does not have weight measurements, and that drives me crazy because if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I like to use my scale. So I actually went through and converted everything so that I could use my scale. So the first thing we need here is 14 grams of olive oil, or any kind of oil. I'm actually using avocado oil. Nine grams of vanilla. Always remember to tear out your scale. Every once in a while I forget. Mm. 170 grams of honey. This is our only sweetener in this. And I like that it's honey and not cane sugar. It takes a minute with this squeezy bottle. I will share the link to the original recipe, but because it's for zucchini bread, I will go ahead and write up the changes that I've made and include the weight measurements and the switch to applesauce. And that will be in the description box below. Okay, we got our honey. Now we need half a cup of almond milk, which is about 122 grams. Our applesauce, you can use whatever applesauce you have. If you have store-bought applesauce, that's fine. I have some home canned applesauce I made a year ago. It's old enough that it's still good, but we do need to be eating through it. And so this is a great use for it. And I don't know how well it comes through on the camera, but it is a bit darker because I made all of our applesauce cinnamon applesauce because that's how we like to eat it. And on the occasions where I bake with it, it's always with something that we're going to add cinnamon anyway. And so I just figure it's a little bit of extra cinnamon. So I am using a measure for this measuring cup, and it's a cup of applesauce. The last of our wet ingredients is that egg that I've got sitting in the warm water. So I'm going to take this off my scale, find my Danish dough whisk, it's my favorite, and get all of our wet ingredients all nice and incorporated. I should have put an apron on. Did you guys see? I tend to wipe my wet hands on my clothes. It would be better on an apron. You know what? Let me grab one. Then I won't get my clothes all dirty. Anybody else really bad about wiping their hands on their clothes? I don't know why. They're just closer than a towel, I guess. Okay. So get my scale turned back on. Air it out. And then it's time to add our dry ingredients. So we need 240 grams of oat flour. I made a little bit more than fit in my canister, so we'll start with that. Grab our canister of oat flour. It's nice and warm. That Vitamix heats it up. And add the rest of our oat flour. Need 2.6 grams of cinnamon or a teaspoon if you prefer. Guys, my scale is acting up again today. Yep, I'm gonna have to because it's not registering. That's a bummer. Since my scale's not working, I busted out a teaspoon measure and we'll just measure that way. So a quarter teaspoon of nutmeg. And a quarter teaspoon of ground ginger. All very fall flavors, right? Oh, it's gonna be delicious. Now I need a teaspoon and a half of baking powder. And a teaspoon of baking soda. My final ingredient is a quarter teaspoon of salt. So the original zucchini bread recipe calls for chocolate chips. That's delicious, but I've never done it in the applesauce bread. It might be really good, but I just have never felt the need to add them. But if you think it sounds good, you should do it. But I'm just going to get this all nice and mixed up. And I have my pan ready. I'm going to spray it with some oil. I have avocado oil in this oil spritzer. And then put this in our baking dish. Just scrape all of our bread batter into this pan. So I probably should have told you earlier, I preheated the oven to 350 degrees, and this is going to go in there for like 35 to 40 minutes. My oven is a smaller oven and it tends to cook a little bit faster, so I normally cut the time a little bit, start checking it earlier. But that's one of those things where you just have to know your own oven and how it works. But I'm going to get this in the oven. The bread's been baking for 40 minutes. So we're going to give it a test with a knife and see if it's done or if it needs a little bit longer. Did not come out clean, so we'll give it another 5 minutes. So our bread is done. I'm going to leave it here for 5 to 10 minutes in this pan to cool, and then I will tip it out onto a cooling rack and let it cool for a little while. But isn't it beautiful? Our bread's been cooling for a good 20 minutes now. I have found that with these oat flour recipes, they do tend to stick more, even though, you know, we sprayed the pan really well. So I am just going to run a spatula around the sides just to try and help with that. It does seem like it's nice and loose, so that's encouraging. Now we're just going to dump it out onto our cooling rack. Oh, it came out perfectly. So flip it over and just let this continue to cool for a little while. I find that it's easier to cut into when it's cooled maybe about an hour. And so we'll come back then and slice into it. While our bread is cooling, it occurred to me, I have this open jar of applesauce now, and applesauce bread would be great with some apple butter. And so I thought, while it's cooling, why don't we just turn the rest of this jar of sauce into apple butter? So I'm just going to put it into a pot here on the stove. And then we'll add a few more ingredients. So I'm going to use some coconut sugar here, about a half a cup. I did not sweeten my applesauce when I made it. I typically don't find I need to. When I make applesauce, I use like half tart apples and half sweet apples, and that's a nice flavor for me. I don't need to add anything else. Maybe if you were using all Granny Smiths or something like that, you would want more. But for apple butter, we want it sweeter. So then we're going to add some cinnamon. There's already cinnamon in my applesauce, so probably about half a teaspoon here. Just a tiny little bit of clove, not much at all. And then I didn't grab it out. I wanted some ginger. So just maybe a quarter teaspoon of ginger. I do want a pinch of salt. And then the last ingredient, which I find is not included in a lot of apple butter recipes, but does seem to me to be the thing that really makes apple butter distinct from applesauce is some apple cider vinegar. So we're gonna eyeball this, but maybe just a tablespoon or two. And then we'll get this on to simmer and just let it simmer down until it's nice and thick. Our applesauce bread is cooled down. The apple butter is ready. So let's cut into it and give it a taste, shall we? So nice and moist. I am going to give it a try just by itself. It's delicious, you guys. You can taste the applesauce. It's sweet, but not too sweet. It's just really good. I am going to dress it like we probably will in our house with a little bit of butter and some apple butter. Because if you make apple butter, you have to try it, right? Mm. The apple butter puts it over the top. The bread is good on its own, but with that apple butter, oh, it's just really good. So I hope you guys will give these a try. The bread is delicious on its own. That apple butter is so good. And you can make that with store-bought applesauce and just add, a few ingredients and end up with something really delicious. So I hope you guys will give it a try. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.